People talk about how great the Ottoman Empire was, but no one talks about how the Ottoman Sultans treated their black slaves like pets. Keep watching to find out the truth. In the harrowing events of 1570 to 71, the Ottoman Empire set its sights on the coastal fortress of Famagusta, strategically located on the Mediterranean island of Cyprus and firmly under Venetian control. This siege would come to be synonymous with the brutal fate that befell Admiral Marco Antonio Bragadin. As the Ottoman Turks relentlessly laid siege to Famagusta, Admiral Bragadin found himself thrust into an agonizing ordeal. The Venetian commander had displayed exceptional resilience, successfully holding off the Turkish forces for months. Yet as the situation grew increasingly dire, Bragadin was left with little choice but to negotiate the city's surrender. However, his surrender did not spare him from a gruesome fate. Suspected of having killed several Turkish prisoners and infuriating the Turks with his steadfast defense, Bragadin faced unspeakable horrors. The Ottoman commander, General Lala Mustafa, resorted to grotesque brutality. Bragadin endured the excruciating amputation of both his ears and nose, followed by weeks of torment in a dark dungeon where he was subjected to the agonizing screams of fellow captives. His suffering escalated as he was forced to carry heavy loads and endured public humiliation. Ultimately, he met a horrific end when he was skinned alive while tied to a column. His body was quartered, serving as trophies for Mustafa's troops. Despite Admiral Marco Antonio Bragadin's courageous decision to negotiate the surrender of Famagusta, his fate took a horrific turn due to suspicions of his involvement in the killing of Turkish prisoners and his unwavering defense of the city. General Lala Mustafa, the Ottoman commander, responded to Bragadin's perceived offenses with ruthless cruelty. Bragadin's willingness to engage in diplomacy did not spare him from unimaginable torture, including the gruesome amputation of both ears and his nose, followed by weeks of agonizing confinement and forced labor. Did you know that within the enigmatic world of the Ottoman harem, far more than mere sexual exploitation unfolded? Beyond its notorious reputation, the harem served as a sanctuary, shielding the women of the imperial household from the outside world. What secrets lie within these sacred walls? How did education and culture thrive in this secluded realm, rivaling that of European royalty? The suffering inflicted upon Admiral Marco Antonio Bragadin following the fall of Famagusta in 1571 is a harrowing testament to the brutality of warfare during that era. After surrendering the city, Bragadin's fate took a nightmarish turn. His ears and nose were savagely cut off, depriving him of essential senses and causing excruciating pain. He was then confined to a dank and lightless dungeon for an agonizing stretch of weeks, enduring both physical and psychological torment. But Bragadin's anguish didn't end there. His captors subjected him to further dehumanizing cruelty by forcing him to carry heavy loads, diminishing his already weakened state. The pinnacle of his suffering came when he was tied to a mast on a Turkish ship, a defenseless target for jeering sailors who pelted him with rocks and insults, degrading him publicly. The most grotesque chapter of Bragadin's ordeal unfolded when he was skinned alive while bound to a column, a horrific act that defies description. His flayed skin was then filled with straw and he was dressed in his uniform before being paraded through the city on an ox, an unimaginable display of sadism. The plight of galley slaves in the Ottoman Empire is a chilling chapter in the annals of human suffering. These unfortunate individuals were subjected to a life of unrelenting misery and degradation. Chained to their benches on warships, they were not only forced to row tirelessly, but also condemned to endure wretched living conditions. Chained in filth, they grappled with disease, and the ever-present specter of drowning haunted them during naval battles. What was life like for these captives who toiled in the bowels of warships? How did the empire employ coercion and violence to maintain control and suppress resistance among miners? Stay tuned for the answer. These galley slaves, often prisoners of war or captives, slept, ate, and relieved themselves in the very same cramped space where they were chained. This inhumane confinement not only caused profound physical discomfort, but also fostered an environment ripe for the spread of infection and disease. Open sores, cuts, and abrasions were common among these unfortunate souls, and such wounds frequently festered in the unsanitary conditions of the galleys. As if these horrific circumstances were not enough, the ultimate dread for galley slaves was the risk of drowning. These ships, propelled by both sail and manpower, were often engaged in perilous naval battles. Should a galley be damaged or sunk in the heat of combat, there was little hope of survival for the slaves chained to their oars, as they were unable to escape or swim to safety. In the grim reality of the Ottoman Empire, slaves who dared to resist their forced labor in mines faced horrific consequences. Those suffering from claustrophobia, unable to endure the confines of subterranean tunnels, were subjected to a cruel and unimaginable fate. They were buried alive, sealing their dreadful end underground. For others who resisted, the notorious Kogan whip awaited them. This merciless instrument of punishment, akin to the infamous cat o' 9 tails, lashed out with brutal force, leaving slaves with agonizing wounds. These lashings were often administered without regard for existing injuries, sending the unfortunate victims into the mines with untreated wounds, further compounding their suffering. The harsh and unforgiving conditions of the Ottoman Empire meant that rebellion was met with swift and brutal retribution, amplifying the horror of life as a slave in that era. Within the Ottoman Empire's dominion, a dark chapter of history unfolded as they engaged in a form of cultural and religious persecution that could be described as a type of genocide. In their Christian-held territories, particularly in the Balkans, the Ottomans employed brutal tactics to subdue the Christian populations. One chilling method involved giving individuals a grim ultimatum: convert to Islam or face death. The Ottoman forces often besieged cities and offered their Christian inhabitants this terrible choice. While some reluctantly converted to Islam to save their lives, most defiantly chose martyrdom, refusing to renounce their faith. Additionally, the Ottomans implemented a sinister system known as the devshirme, where they kidnapped European Christian children. These unfortunate youngsters were separated from their families, their faith, and their cultural heritage. While some were converted to Islam and groomed as janissaries, elite soldiers in the Ottoman army, others were dispatched to serve in various capacities within the empire, such as advisors or eunuchs. Castration held a sinister significance in the Ottoman Empire, where it was a disturbingly common practice. Young boys, including those kidnapped for the janissaries, underwent this horrific procedure, which rendered them incapable of reproduction. Eunuchs, as they were known, were then strategically employed in various roles throughout the empire. One of the most notable positions held by eunuchs was guarding the harem. Their unique position, devoid of sexual desire, made them suitable for safeguarding the women of the imperial household from outside influences. Beyond the harem, eunuchs also served as advisors and tutors to the wives and concubines of high-ranking officials, a reflection of their trusted status within the Ottoman hierarchy. This unsettling practice exemplifies the extremes to which the Ottoman Empire went to maintain control and hierarchy. The harem, a term derived from the Arabic word haram, meaning sacred place, was a complex institution in the Ottoman Empire that extended beyond the popular misconceptions of being merely a place for sexual exploitation. While it did include concubines and served as a repository for the Sultan's companions, it encompassed a broader spectrum of roles and functions. The harem was a hidden region within the imperial palace that was created to protect and accommodate the women who were part of the Ottoman imperial household. These ladies included the spouses, concubines, servants, and even daughters of the Sultan. The harem was not a brothel by any stretch of the imagination. Rather, it was a place where these ladies were protected from the outside world, which ensured their safety and well-being. In the harem, receiving an education was an essential component of daily life. The women who lived in this remote region had a well-rounded education that covered a wide range of subjects, such as music, art, mathematics, poetry, and religion. They were given access to a wealth of information, the likes of which frequently eclipsed the education that many European royals of the time could receive. Although it is a fact that some of the women who worked in the harem were exploited sexually, it is imperative that we recognize the wide range of experiences that were held within its walls by those who worked there. Within the constraints of their lives, the harem offered many people a one-of-a-kind educational and personal growth opportunity that was otherwise unavailable to them. As a result, the harem was not a unidimensional, but rather a multi-dimensional institution which reflected the convoluted, intricate character of daily life in the Ottoman Empire.